Hey everyone, Laura Thomas here, and I wanted to talk today a little bit about nutrition. So, nutrition is not something that I really talk a lot about in my practice. For starters, I am not a registered dietitian. And in the state of Ohio, you really have to be a registered dietitian to prescribe and give people specific guidelines for how they should eat. I also don't have the credentials to read fecal or blood tests. So typically, if someone comes to me and says, "Hey, I just want to incorporate more protein or I want to incorporate more vegetables," a lot of times what I do is I guide them to things like the food pyramid, or I guide them to, listen to their bodies and kind of take note of what they're eating and when they eat it, how they feel. And I might even share some recipes and things like that that I have put together, guides that I've put together with dietitians or that have been dietitian reviewed. But other than that, I really don't touch it. So I wanted to come on today and talk a little bit about this time of year. And this time of year is spring in the Northern Hemisphere. And something that can happen a lot this time of year is people start getting into discussions about nutrition. And sometimes these discussions happen at work, which is totally fine. It's just a thing to talk about, right? I first want to make the statement that food is really personal, right? So I think we forget how personal food can be. And what I mean by that is it can be cultural. So for some people, food is very cultural. It's a very family connected time for them. So to, come at somebody for how they eat because it's how they're culturally connected isn't very empathetic, and it's not very trauma informed, for lack of a better word, because that's how I approach my practice. We also want to be careful that if we're talking to people about nutrition, or if they're asking us like, "Hey, I eat X, like, what do you think about that?" People might just say that in conversation or what have you, that we also remember to get curious about what their background is and their relationship to food. So, for example, we don't know if someone has had an eating disorder, whether that be an eating disorder where they starved themselves or a binge eating disorder. We don't know if they came from a family where food was scarce, had a scarcity of food, or perhaps their parent worked multiple jobs and a home cooked meal wasn't really part of their everyday regimen. These things create our nervous system and help our nervous system connects to this. And so what happens is over time, if we were fed a lot of food from, fast food and things like that, that's what we're going to gravitate towards. And it's no fault of that person. And I think that's where we get a lot of this individualistic shame and blame happening. And I think we have to remember that if we don't address things like the social determinants of health, which I'll link to below, that we're sort of doing ourselves an injustice. We're not being really fair. On the flip side, if you're someone who is getting critiqued, or you feel like you're getting criticized about what you're eating and how you're eating, always know that it's really no one's business how are you eat or when you eat or things like that. It is important to always get curious more than being judgmental. So if you watch Ted Lasso, you know that quote. So if someone is getting judgmental about what you're eating, just be like, I didn't come here to get judged by this. I didn't really want, this isn't what I'm looking for right now in this space. People also emotionally eat, and that's a whole mental health component. And so if someone's an emotional eater or not eating when they get emotional, that's also something that is beyond the scope of most general people out in the world. That's something that somebody may need to discuss with a professional or take note of. But again, we also have to, in workplaces, give people options. So if, for example, someone says, "I am an emotional eater," and they know that if something traumatic happens at work or something dramatic and they are going to go right to the vending machine or whatever, are we giving those people an option to have another outlet? For example, can they go walk around the building and take a breath? Can they go sit in silence for 10 minutes and sort of calm their nervous system down? Can they, have an opportunity just to call a friend? I mean, just various things can help them through sort of a tough moment in their day. And everyone has different ways of regulating their emotions. This happens through, growth and maturity and all those kinds of things too. Another thing I want to be very cautious of as we're going into this season, I call it, of, the diet fads are going to start coming in and things like that, is that if you are someone who has lost weight, or you're someone who lives in a larger body, that you're not using things like comparing yourself. Like that's never really helpful either. So when we say things like you don't want to look like me, or you don't want to end up like me, like that's not helpful for anyone. It's really not helpful for you. And I pray to God that if you have children, that you're not speaking like that in front of them, because that gives them body dysmorphia ideas. And that's not helpful either. So if you do find yourself talking poorly about your body in front of younger people that you are making an impression on, I would urge you to rethink that and recalibrate that. You don't have to be like sunny, happy-go-lucky, super positive fake, because that's not what I'm looking for either. And that's not, the positive vibe only thing is not realistic. And we need to also be conscientious of how we are coming across. So don't compare yourself to somebody else. Again, you don't know somebody's background. You don't know someone's genetics even, right? Genetics play a much bigger role than we think. It's about 40 to 70% genetics play in body types. And I always say this, and I'll say it again, but we could all eat the same thing, work out the exact same way. We are still going to have a plethora of body types, because we are not all made the same. We don't process foods the same. We all have different traumas. We all have different, it's just like there's so much individual lived experiences that happen with nutrition and with eating and all that kind of stuff. And we tend to forget that. We tend to think just like, eat this way, you'll be healthy. And yes, and also no. And a lot of people don't have access to someone who can really break down their individual needs, perhaps. Like I worked with a dietitian for a year, and that was really helpful for me. And it got me, to a place. I didn't lose weight, by the way. Just want to make that statement, because I didn't do it to lose weight, but I did it so that I could find, again, like feeling better. I just wasn't feeling great. I was having some digestive issues, things like that. So just being really mindful about when we do talk to people about nutrition, to get more curious than judgmental, okay? Just to ask questions. If someone says to you, do you think I eat too much? Pause, because I don't know. Like if someone doesn't eat breakfast, but you see them eat a whole ton of food at noon, but you don't know that they don't eat breakfast, like then they're probably not eating enough. Or I love this from one of my mentors, Christina Montalvo. If you find that you're craving a certain food constantly, it's probably because you're not getting enough of that nutrient. For example, if you're craving ice cream all the time, you might not be getting enough fat in your diet, right? So like what nutrient could be missing? Where can you add it in so that maybe, again, I'm all about like, having a banana smoothie is not the same thing as having ice cream. And I think your brain knows that. So, but just making it mindful, just pausing and saying like, is this what I want right now? Or am I eating out of emotion? So pausing is super, super helpful. A lot of times we go into like this whirlwind of emotion, and for us to really just calm our nervous system and center and ground and just say like, I just had a really stressful experience. Like, is it, do I need to eat, or do I just need to like take a breath and take a beat? And then again, if you are an employer, if you're a manager, whatever, if you're a leader at your workplace, are you giving people opportunities to do a different type of healing modality or some type of different stress modality, stress relief modality? Those are also questions to ask. So I hope this helps. If you have any questions, feel free to let me know. This is stuff that I don't work on nutrition in a detailed way, but I definitely work on habit building and people really getting back in tune with their bodies, because I feel like we get really disconnected as we go through life. So if you have any questions on that, feel free to drop me a line and let me know. But March is National Nutrition Month, so I hope that you have a great rest of your March, and I'll talk to you all real soon.